everybody. It is time for another 2021-2022 NHL season preview, and it is our final season preview, 32 out of 32, and today we're looking at the Dallas Stars. And the reason I kept putting Dallas off and waiting was because I wanted to see how their goaltending situation shook out. But with the final roster set, we now have our answer. And Dallas is a really interesting team heading into this season. I mean, back in 2020, they went on a run to the Stanley Cup Finals in the bubble. And then last season, they didn't even make the playoffs. But they did have a lot of injury issues that certainly contributed to that. And now heading into this year, there's kind of mixed expectations on what Dallas is going to be. Some people tend to think that the Cup run was the outlier and that we're going to have another year similar to last year for Dallas. Other people think that last year was the outlier and that injuries kind of killed the team and that they can get back to being the Cup level team and certainly a playoff team if they remain healthy this season. So the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, but we're going to find out over the next few months here as the NHL season kicks off. So before we get into it, I just ask you to please subscribe and hit that thumbs up. It helps out a ton and is greatly appreciated. But let's get started with the preview. And before we look forward, we have to look back. Like I said, last season was not a great one for the Dallas Stars. They went 23, 19, and 14, 60 points on the year, and they finished just outside of a playoff spot, 5th in the Central. They were 4 points shy of Nashville and taking that last playoff spot. So they did miss the postseason last year, but like I said, and teams never want to use injuries as an excuse, but there is no doubt that the injuries last year for the Stars played a major role in them not getting back to the playoffs. They didn't have Tyler Seguin until the very end of the season. Ben Bishop missed the entire year and is on LTIR this year again as well. So and those were the major ones, but they had a lot of other ones as well throughout the season, just guys in and out of the lineup. And there's no doubt it had an effect and an impact on the team and how successful or not successful they were last year. Offensively, the Stars were not bad, 2.79 goals for per game. Kind of middle of the road offensively, not great, not bad, middle of the pack offense. And that's about what you would expect from Dallas. And defensively, they were actually pretty good. 2.64 goals against per game. Not top of the league or anything like that, but very solid defensively last year. And they had a plus goal differential, which, you know, not too many teams with plus goal differentials missed the playoffs, but Dallas was one of them. Power play was actually really good last year. Even without Tyler Seguin, 23.6% on the power play and very, very effective on the man advantage. And their penalty kill was right around the middle of the pack at 79.1% on the PK. So again, nothing that you're going to go and brag about, but certainly not bad either, almost 80% on the PK. So numbers-wise, it was actually a pretty solid year for the Stars. It was just they couldn't win enough games. And again, a lot of those OT losses, 14 losses in overtime or the shootout last year. If they had even made half of those, not even half of those wins, they would have been a playoff team. You know, just another few wins, 2 or 3 more, and they would have been in the playoffs. So they got to figure out overtime, I guess, because if they can start winning in OT instead of losing, you know, that would have been a lot of extra points that would have gotten them into the playoffs. But nonetheless, Dallas looking to get back into the postseason this year and have a bit of a bounce-back season. As far as their changes this offseason, there have been a few. Additions-wise, they picked up defenseman Ryan Suter after he was bought out by the Minnesota Wild. And while I do think that the contract they gave him is a bit longer than I would have liked, I don't think the cap hit is too bad. And like I said, when Minnesota bought him out, I think Suter still has at least a year or two of high-level top 4 defense in him. So I like the pickup there. They also added goaltender Braden Holtby, who is coming off a horrendous year up with the Vancouver Canucks and was bought out. However, he played extremely well in the preseason this year, so it's definitely going to be something to watch. See if Braden Holtby gets back to being the old Braden Holtby with Dallas this season. They picked up depth forwards Luke Glendening and Michael Raffl, and they'll play bottom six roles on this team. And they picked up defenseman Yanni Hakanpää, who will play a pretty important defense role with them as well. On the subtraction side of things, the biggest loss was certainly defenseman Jamie Oleksiak, as he was taken in the expansion draft by Seattle and then signed a deal there, so he's now with the Kraken. Defenseman Stephen Johns retired after concussion issues, and he has now moved on from hockey. Depth forwards Andrew Cogliano and Justin Dowling left in free agency. Defenseman Mark Pysyk went back to Buffalo, and defenseman Sami Vatanen was not re-signed and wasn't signed anywhere in the NHL, so he moves on as well. But not a ton of major changes, but losing Oleksiak is definitely a loss. However, they pretty much replace him with Ryan Suter, and then they add Braden Holtby to the goaltending mix and add a couple of depth forwards in Glendening and Raffl. So, not like massive changes for the Dallas Stars, but some decent swapping of depth and whatnot this year. Now it's time to take a look at my projected roster for Dallas. And at this point, this isn't even a projected roster. Dallas has, like all NHL teams, submitted their first 23-man final roster, and this is what it is. Up front, we've got Tyler Seguin, Jamie Benn, Joe Pavelski, Alexander Radulov, Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, Radek Faksa, Denis Gurianov, Luke Glendening, Michael Raffl, Blake Como, Ty Dellandrea, Oscar Back, and Tanner Kero. On defense, Miro Heiskanen, John Klingberg, Esa Lindell, Ryan Suter, Andre Sekera, and Joel Hanley. And interesting, they only have 6 defensemen on the active roster, so if they need a 7th, they're going to have to call somebody up or activate Yanni Hakanpää from IR, which we'll talk about in a second. Goaltending-wise, they went with 3 goalies, and I waited all this time to do Dallas because I was waiting to see how their goaltending situation was going to shake out. Well, they just decided to keep all 3. Anton Khudobin, Braden Holtby, and Jake Ottinger are all on the roster, at least as of right now, and looks like they're going to roll with 3, and then Ben Bishop is on LTIR. And we'll have to see if he even plays at all again this season or if his career could potentially maybe be done. But moving on to the depth side of things now. Up front, Joel Kiviranta, Ty Fellhaber, and Nick Camano, I guess, look like the guys that would be first in line for a call-up. Joel Kiviranta not making the starting roster for the team is a bit of a surprise. He was a guy that really came on in the playoffs in 2020 and then, played games last year, and him not making the team was definitely a little bit of a surprise, but he got beat out, and Oscar Back, young Swedish forward, actually ended up taking a roster spot, which I would assume would have been Kiviranta's had Back not made it. So then Fellhaber and Camano are both guys that can certainly be called up from the AHL and play a adequate role in the NHL. On defense, you've got Yanni Hakanpää, who I think once he's ready to return from injury, will certainly be, either the 7th defenseman or maybe replace Joel Hanley in the lineup, and Hanley becomes the 7th defenseman, and Hakanpää goes into the top 6, but he is starting the season on IR, not quite ready yet. And they also have Thomas Harley, young 20-year-old D-man who certainly will be starting and playing a top role in the AHL, but certainly is available for call-up if they have injuries on the defensive side of things and need that. And then they really don't need another goaltender because they have 3 on their roster already, but Ben Bishop is on LTIR, and if he is ever able to come back and be able to play, he obviously inserts himself into the mix there with those other 3 goalies. However, his health is very, very much a question, and it is not a good sign that he is starting this season again on LTIR, and we'll just have to see how that works out long term. But they have 3 goalies even without Bishop, and they're very, very deep in that part of the roster. So that is Dallas's roster, at least what they announced last night for their official first 23-man roster, and definitely a little bit different going with the 3 goaltenders and only 6D, but not overly surprising given their current situation and given the fact that they literally have 4 if he was healthy NHL goaltenders, but Bishop is not healthy. So they still have 3 bona fide NHL goalies, and that's going to be a good thing in some ways. Obviously very deep in net, but also, they have decisions to make. Like they start having injury problems and need to call guys up. Are they really going to be able to keep 3 goalies on the active roster all year? That remains to be seen. But Dallas, like I said, very interesting team. We'll see if they get back to being a playoff team like they were in 2020, or if we have another repeat of last season where, they were a good team. They were a decent team, middle of the road team, but they weren't good enough to make the playoffs. And they're in a tough division again in the Central. It's going to be I think a real battle between the teams in the middle of that division for those playoff spots, and Dallas should be right in the thick of that playoff race all year long. But with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our merch store, membership, and donations are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys soon.